Good morning, everybody. I want to tell you a little bit of a story. It's about a man who didn't believe that Druid would be a good spellcaster. He thought, why would I play Druid when I could play Wizard or Sorcerer, who got a buffed spell pool? And this man was very, very skeptical because he'd heard lots of other people say, but no, you don't understand. Druid is fun. Spellcaster Druid is good. Now the man thought he understood what they were saying. They were saying, ah yes, Druid makes a good healer. Druid can do good crowd control, but Spellcaster you say? All around Spellcaster? Is that even possible? The man had had enough, and so he decided to take it upon himself to plunge himself into the depths of Druid. And here is what he found. Dude, I put out the flame! With cold breath! I didn't know you could do that! Did you guys know you could do that? I put out the campfire. Oh my god. I've been playing this game for so long and I didn't even know you could do that. People come to me, ask me questions all the time. Strimtom, how do I do this? Strimtom, tell me everything, because you know so many things about the game. I'm learning so much today. Screw you learn something new every day. I'm learning 100 new things every day. This is the coolest. That's right. While Druid is not the absolute most powerful thing, it is exceedingly fun and has all sorts of cool experiences, so I kind of wanted to share with you guys my experience trying out Caster Druid for the first time, which seems a little bit crazy given the fact that, you know, Druid's been out for 100 years, so it should have been something I'd tried sooner, but I don't know, it just never seemed as interesting. Wolf Druid is really fun, Bear Druid is really fun, and there's other more interesting spellcasters, so I didn't really see Caster Druid as being the most prominent option in my mind. However, Caster Druid has kind of gone above and beyond my expectations. This character has been just plowing through Reaper 2 without really any issues thanks to my self-healing ability as well as the high damage spell-like abilities from Produce Flame as well as Call Lightning. Yeah, you get Creeping Cold, and yeah, you get Salt Ray, and Salt Ray is pretty useful in actually stunning monsters. Creeping Cold, I don't use it too often, I find it's okay at best, and I've got my character up to level 10 now, and it seems pretty good, really good against monsters that are made of fire or take double damage from cold, but other than that, I usually just stick with Call Lightning and Produce Flame. But Druid is pretty much your just run-of-the-mill caster, has some elemental spells, and you need to make sure you've got all your elemental bases covered. The way that I'm doing this is with the Slave Master's Staff, giving me fire, cold, lightning, and acid spell power, so that I don't have to worry about having any particular items on, and then just basically casting all of the spells. However, I did make two discoveries that it turns out make this class extremely fun and a lot more interesting, and I think this is something that a lot of other classes or potentially future designs can follow up on, that I feel like potentially Alchemist didn't actually follow through with during its initial point of design. You see, with the Druid, it's all around the seasons. You have the two different seasons. The summer season for all of the positive or fire-based effects, you know, light damage, positive damage, alignment-based damage, stuff like that. And then you have the winter seasons for the negative damage, like cold and acid and lightning. Depending on which season you're in, you gain bonuses to both the caster levels and spell power of your spells. Now, the caster level portion is very, very interesting. The increased caster level allows you to deal a lot more damage. And Druid has a fairly high maximum caster level on most of their spells, meaning Call Lightning caps out at 15, so that extra cast level is going to last on you for quite a while. The even bigger thing is that swapping into different seasons is instantaneous. The system used to be that you would be in summer for 5 minutes and then you would be in winter for 5 minutes, and you had a button on a 2.5 minute cooldown that would swap you from one season to the next. Now, you are in whatever season you choose to be in because it's just a stance, it's a toggle that has no animation and basically no cooldown, and you can transfer between the two at any given moment. The way that I've been playing the character is constantly in combat. I am swapping from one season to the next, one season to the next. I go into fire, or the summer season, and then I'm dropping down Produce Flame spell-like ability, Salt Ray, swap into winter, Call Lightning spell-like ability, Creeping Cold, swap back to summer, and repeat. I've been really, really enjoying it. It adds this level of almost like additional customization to how I want to just play my character. Do I want to stay in summer for a little bit longer because there's maybe a cold monster here and I'd rather just hit it with get that extra damage on the fire? Or maybe I do want to swap into winter because the Call Lightning is going to do more damage right now. It adds an interesting level of gameplay, and I found it surprisingly engaging, constantly swapping stances in combat. Now granted, it does add a lot of extra work to do because you need to make sure you're hitting those keys. I feel like if you're trying to skill click, it may be difficult to do if you're not key binding them, just because trying to then click a stance, then click a skill, then click a stance, then click a skill might take a little bit extra time. I'm sure you could probably macro into the stance to each of the individual skills. However, I'm not sure how good of an idea that is because one, I don't know if that's something that gets you banned, and two, I don't know how you would make it so that you would only have it on. Like, you wouldn't want to accidentally toggle, you know, let's just say you macro it into Call Lightning spell-like ability and Call Lightning, press Call Lightning spell-like ability, and it puts you in Winter Stance, you press Call Lightning, and then it would turn it off because you would be macroing onto the same skill. So really it promotes an active playstyle, and that does add a little bit of extra time consuming and mental work, but it's pretty cool. Now, this character ended up working out pretty well so far. There's a couple things that make it work. One, obviously, the past lives and the gear make this character just demolish in Reaper 2. If you want to have the same experience that I'm having, and you're on a first life character, this character will perform exactly the same way in Elite difficulty. For those that don't know, your damage is reduced by almost like 40% on Reaper 2. So if you go into Elite difficulty and you take my damage numbers, you'll probably be doing about 60% of my damage, so like 40% less, and you'll have the same experience. With the one difference being that you'll be able to heal a lot easier. So if you're just starting out and you want to try this character, don't worry about, you know, maybe not having all of the stats or the past lives. You really don't need it. That's okay. Just make sure you're aware of what difficulty you happen to be playing in. Also, if you watch any of the time that I've been playing on the live streams, because I am live streaming every single day now, the character that I'm playing, I hit shrines all the time. A lot of people will go through quests and they try to do it all in one go, and if they can't do it all in one go, they might be upset about their mana reservations and that sort of thing. I don't care about that. I literally just stop and hit every single shrine in every single quest, and it means I never have to worry about running out of spell points, which is the way it should be. Now, the last interesting discovery that I made is that, you know, druids are supposed to get an elemental form in the future. You get to turn into either a fire elemental or a water elemental, and it really severely boosts the powers of your spells. Now, this is a really cool idea and something I wanted to explore very heavily. However, you don't get that until later, and druid's biggest weakness in the early game is not having any area of effect spells. Sure, you technically get Flame Strike at level 7, but Flame Strike is one of the worst spells in the entire game. Not only having a big delay on when you cast it, meaning most monsters are going to move out of the area of effect, but also the fact that it does basically 0 damage in comparison to all your other spells. So to combat this problem, I came up with a genius idea, which was to go into Winterwolf form. Now, this might seem very odd because Winterwolf, as a wolf ability, makes it so that your spells take much longer for their cooldown. Now, longer cooldown sounds really, really bad for a spellcaster, so you might be thinking, okay, wait a second, why would you even consider doing this? This sounds really, really dumb. You sound dumb. And yes, while I might sound dumb, it is also important to recognize that most of the time you're casting spells, you're actually just casting the spell-like abilities. And a lot of your spells have extremely short cooldowns in the first place. So while you do have a 2.5 times longer cooldown on all of your individual spells, Call Lightning only has like a 3-second cooldown. No, I don't even think it's 3 seconds. So that turns it to 6 seconds, which is really not that big of a deal. And you don't even cast that many spells anyway on your character. Most of your spells you cast are spell-like abilities, and spell-like abilities are unaffected by cooldowns. This is including spells such as Call Lightning, Produce Flame, Creeping Cold, and Salt Ray. All of these spells, you absolutely don't have to worry about what you're actually casting, which is pretty good. You don't have to worry about like, oh, I'm in animal form, they have a longer cooldown, because they don't. They're spell-like abilities, they keep their original cooldown. The reason why you want to go into Winterwolf form is because Winterwolf gets a spell at 5th level called Cold Breath. Now, Cold Breath is a spell that no Winterwolf has pretty much ever used, because if you're playing as a Winterwolf, it's highly likely that you won't have any cold spell power, any cold spell crit, anything that would synergize with it whatsoever. However, as a caster druid, this is a godsend for a couple reasons. Number one, Cold Breath was originally changed completely to make it fit better for the Wolf Druid playstyle, and as a result, it actually has no saving throw. Now, this is incredibly fortuitous because it means if you are playing as like a melee Wolf Druid, you can throw it in every once in a while if you have some spell power. You don't need to worry about your wisdom score. It pretty much always, well, not pretty much, it actually does always land. It lands every single time. As a caster druid, since it's actually a cold spell, it classifies as a winter spell, so upon getting it, it's actually much more powerful than you would originally think, and it can clear off huge packs of monsters right away. You have the spell power to support it, and potentially even the spell crit if you get some basic items, such as something like the Thrumming Spark Cord out of Ravenloft. Being in wolf form gives you that much wanted AoE, which allows you to sustain yourself a lot better in large packs. I find that this character really struggles with some area of effect, and being able to just cold breath through large packs of monsters is extremely useful. And for those who are playing on a first life character, you don't have to deal with the saving throws or having a low wisdom score potentially, because you can just ignore all of that and hit monsters anyway. Obviously, this doesn't work against undead, certain constructs, many things that happen to be immune to cold, but there are a lot of monsters, especially in the 8 to 13 range, that are not immune to cold, which are pretty useful to throw this against. So next time you're jonesing for that elemental form and you don't have it, try Winter Wolf form. It's reasonably powerful, it gives you that extra cold breath, and there's almost no penalty. Faster movement speed, and if you want to, you can even put in the first level spell Takedown, which is a trip that actually scales off of your wisdom, which means you can easily trip any monster and get yourself some free crowd control as well. Now, if you want to build your own caster druid, let me show you exactly how to do it with my following write-up. So here we are, the legendary Spellcaster Druid. How exactly do you build this thing? Well, the long and short of it is you have a ton of flexibility because this character is pretty much as easy to build as any other spellcaster and follows mostly the same pattern. To start out, here we got Strimtom. I'm a level 10 Druid. I'm a half-elf, and I'll go into exactly why in just a bit. It may be helpful for you in the future. But if you want to build one of these, max out your Wisdom, put this to the max, and the rest of your stats don't matter. You don't need Strength because you don't hit stuff. You don't need Dex because you don't hit stuff. You don't need Int because you don't really need your skill points. And you don't need Charisma unless you're doing what I'm doing with the half-elf thing. And you need Constitution for health. So for the most part, it's put your points into Wisdom, and as long as your Wisdom is maxed, you can put your points wherever you feel like it. More Constitution to give you more health. Maybe you like having extra skills. You want to splash a level of Rogue at some point to get yourself some trapping ability. You know, figure out your points outside of that. But Wisdom, as long as you have that, your character's going to work just fine. Now, I'm playing as a half-elf, which might seem kind of strange. And the reason is because I've got a 14 Charisma here, which gives me access to one of the racial feats, the Dilettante Warlock. So half-elves, if you didn't know, get like a Dilettante feat where they can learn a little bit about another class. If you take something like Dilettante Barbarian, you gain additional health. If you gain something like Dilettante Fighter, you gain proficiency with all of the martial weapons. And if you take Dilettante Warlock, you get this ability. And what this says is you have a powerful otherworldly patron interested in you for item purposes. You count as level of 1 Warlock, blah blah blah. The most important thing is this toggle. Toggle. You deal 1d4 extra fire damage with attacks and spells. This triggers at most once every 2 seconds, and this toggle is exclusive with the Warlock Pact. That's not what this does. It kind of does that, for sure. If you attack stuff, if you hit monsters with weapons, then this absolutely does what it says. A d4 extra damage with attacks and spells every 2 seconds. That's not very good. So you might ask yourself, well, why would you take that? The reason is, this doesn't do that. When you cast spells, it actually does a d4 damage per level, and it scales with your spell power. Though a d4 might not sound like a lot, but I'm level 10 Druid, so if I cast a spell, that's 10 extra d4s, or 10 to 40 additional damage. However, it's important to note that this actually scales with the additional caster levels I get from swapping seasons and being in the appropriate season, as I mentioned earlier in the video. So, using this actually gives me now 12 d4s, or 12 to 48 damage. However, even more important, this scales with your fire spell power. Now my character has a fire spell power of 165 in winter, but even still at 165, that's effectively like 2.5 times normal damage, a little bit higher than that. So this is somewhere between like 30 and almost like 80 damage on top of whatever I'm doing with my spell every 2 seconds. This damage is huge, and it can critically strike because I happen to have a 25% chance to critically strike with fire spells, allowing me to hit for hundreds of points of damage. So this works extremely well, and it's very potent. It helps out a lot, so if you want to try this, you can. The important thing about the half-elf Dilettante is you won't be able to take this unless you have a 13 Charisma as the requirement, which is why my character started with a base 14. Outside of that, I've got my skills. I'm using Spot, Spellcraft, Use Magic Device, Heal, and Diplomacy. If you don't want to have as much intelligence, then you can just take Heal, Use Magic Device, and Spellcraft. These 3 are just fine. Druids get 4 different skills per level, so if you have a -1 on intelligence and you're a first life character, you just skip Spot and Diplomacy and your character's basically fine. As far as feats go, I started with Maximize at level 1, since you get a spell-like ability at level 1, and then Quicken. After that, for my 6 and 9 feats, I decided to take some of the nice feats that you get for having past lives, so I took Arcane Initiate, Past Life Wizard for +1 to all DCs, and Completionist because it's effectively +1 to all DCs by giving you +2 Wisdom. If you don't have those abilities, then I would recommend instead sticking with the tried and true basics, especially if you're like a first life character or you don't have some of those things. Grab Empower. Empower spell, something I don't personally take because it doesn't help my damage as much, but if you have not as good items, Empower is going to have a bigger impact, and it works with all your spell-like abilities for free, so you can grab Empower. And on top of that, some of the basic spell focus feats. Druids are mostly evocation spells for their damage, so grab like evocation focus to get some extra DCs on those spells when you want to hurt your enemies. Now, I made sure to take, of the wild shapes, grabbing Winter Wolf. Winter Wolf is just really strong because it gives me the actual cold breath ability, which is super good, and I'll kind of go into some of the spells here, but it's this spell right here, cold breath. It's very weird. That has a 2-second cooldown, which is not increased by being in wolf form. It costs 20 spell points, it has no save, and it does a bunch of damage. And it actually makes it worth it to be in wolf form. The individual spells that I took, for the most part, I made sure to grab all the damage spells. Produce Flame, Creeping Cold, Call Lightning. I used Enveloping Swarm a little bit. It is actually a very, very powerful spell. I just find in Heroics, most monsters don't have enough health to justify using Enveloping Swarm. They'll usually die pretty quick. And then I'm grabbing Cold Breath. Along the way, picking up all the healing spells and some of the useful buff spells, such as Jump, or Longstrider, Merfolk's Blessing, stuff like that. Pretty straightforward. The only spell I would kind of avoid, in here you get Splinter Bolt. I'm not a big fan of Splinter Bolt. I don't think that the spell is very good. You can kind of think of it like, oh, what is that spell? Scorching Ray. Except it's just kind of worse than Scorching Ray, because you don't really get a lot of force spell power. So if you like bad Scorching Ray, then Splinter Bolt is for you. Again, it's not the worst spell, it's just not as good as something like Scorching Ray, because it scales off of force instead of fire spell power. However, it does a decent amount of damage, and it gives you some good range. It's definitely something to consider. In fact, I probably could put it in over Flame Blade, and I should do that. However, a spell that I have enjoyed quite a bit is Salt Ray. I don't think you should use Salt Ray as a regular spell because it's kind of expensive, but the spell-like ability, since you can cast it very quickly, does cause a stun, and the stun works on anything that is corporeal, so it works on regular monsters that can be stunned, as well as undead, golems, other things like that, oozes. So as long as a monster is corporeal, as in it exists physically, then you can hit it. Monsters that don't exist physically, like specters, wraiths, anything that has an incorporeal property, reapers, they are immune to the stun from Salt Ray, although they do take the damage. As far as the Enhancement Tree goes, it should be no surprise that all my points are spent in the Season's Herald tree. Your racial tree doesn't matter. I don't think there's any races that have too much of an impact. Azamar will give you some defensive bonuses. In Half Elf with the Dilettante, I'm just getting extra mana, but I don't think it really has that big of an impact. This is just extra stats. It's not really the core of what makes your character good. Instead, in Season's Herald, I'm picking up all the crit, all the spell-like abilities, all the cores, and on top of that, we're also grabbing Autumn Winds. This is one of the best abilities in the whole game. Feather Falling, dodge, and when a monster hits you, they have a chance to get knocked down. This is exceedingly good. And then Spring's Resurgence. I only put 1 point into Spring's Resurgence because increasing the Spring's Resurgence roll here doesn't actually increase the healing or the potency or anything. It just reduces the cooldown and the cost. And, like, it has a 5-minute, like, duration. So you can just cast this on yourself and then cast this on somebody else, and cycling through the whole party will take you 40 seconds. So it's like not a big deal. It has no cast time, it just instantly goes on. So that's all pretty much how I did that. I wouldn't recommend most of this other stuff. You could take some of the efficient meta magics, but like, who cares about the efficient meta magics? You're not really going to be using meta magics on most of your spells. You're pretty much going to be relying on all the spell-like abilities for the most part. Then you've also got Strength of Solstice. This is a good ability. Definitely take it if your DCs are lacking. For me, because my DCs are a little bit higher, I'm not. But if you're worried about that, definitely take this. And then you're going to want to take everything on the tier 5, because all of it is extremely good. Now, as far as the other points that I've spent, I spent some points in Nature's Protector. 11 points in Nature's Protector gives you 8 plus 16 plus 16 is 40 additional hit points for just these 3 cores, which is pretty good. And it gives you the Nature's Defense stance. So right now, my character happens to have a 59 physical and resistance rating, 41 magical resistance rating. But it's also important to note that I'm a complete bonehead, and I have not turned on Nature's Defense since I got it several levels ago. So if I actually turn it on right now and put it on my tree, boom, that's an extra 20 physical and 20 magical resistance rating, as well as +3 to all of my saves. It's extremely defensive, and it's something I highly recommend you invest in, especially considering this form doesn't require you to be in animal form. It looks like it does, but it actually doesn't, so you can go ahead and just turn this on and get the extra stats from it. Outside of that, your basic playstyle is pretty straightforward. You have your 2 different seasons. So on my track, I have the Elder of Winter and the Child of Summer, and you want to swap between them. Am I casting fire spells? Cool, Child of Summer. Am I casting winter spells? Boom, Elder of Winter. And you can swap between them. And as I said, there are these little toggles that go on. It doesn't cost anything to swap. A lot of people thought it cost mana to swap or something. It doesn't. So that way you can get more bang for your buck out of your spells. You're able to just like, okay, I'm in summertime, produce Flame, Salt Ray. Wintertime, Call Lightning, Creeping Cold, Cold Breath. So that's essentially how it works. And as I said, I use Takedown just because Takedown allows me to get a trip off. Not only does it look wicked cool, and it's one of the reasons why I love playing Wolf Druid all the time, but the Takedown is really, really potent. So yeah, I highly recommend make sure you have that if possible, just because it works on Reapers as well. So if you're getting chased by a Reaper and you don't know what to do, you can just boom, take down, and then you don't have to deal with them anymore. Anyways, that is the gist of how you should play Caster Druid, at least how I'm playing Caster Druid. It's nice because you have all the spells, basically. So you can always get around some type of monster's resistances. I think one of the reasons why it might be nice to have Splinter Bolt is for things like golems that take full damage from it versus them having resistance to all the different spells. So it probably is a good idea to hold on to Splinter Bolt, although getting force spell power is not the easiest thing to do, as my character has basically... Oh, apparently I have a good amount. I don't know where that comes from. I don't know what items I'm even wearing. Who am I right now? As far as equipment goes, for early leveling and things to make your time easier, there's a couple things you can do. One of which I believe I've been too lazy and I haven't actually gotten it right out of my inventory. Yes, the Alchemical Stone. If you have the class Alchemist and you make an Alchemist with Veteran status level 4 or level 7, when you create your character, you'll get this item for free, and this item is a level 1 item with potency 66 on an orb that's bound to account, which means you can put it in your shared account storage and then transfer it over to another character. This makes it super easy as a druid. I only replaced this item at level 8 when I got the Slave Master Staff, which gives 70 spell power to Fire, Electric, Cold, and Acid, as well as the Lores and Insightful Evocation and Concentration Focus and Mana. This is a really, really good item for low levels. You can go ahead and do that. I have a whole Slave Lord set, but you don't really need that, and a couple other items to help you out. If you have Ravenloft, picking up the Coat of the Traveler, because it is a medium armor set, or if you're able to get the heavy armor out of Black and Blue, which name I can't remember, but it is very, very strong. For this type of character. And then there's also the option to pick up the Thrumming Spark Cord, again out of Ravenloft, because your cold damage and your lightning damage are your hardest hitters. You only have one fire spell, which is Produce Flame. Again, yes, Flame Strike exists, but it also sucks. So you're mostly going to be doing Call Lightning, Cold Breath, Call Lightning, Cold Breath, Call Lightning, Cold Breath, in that order. You're not going to be doing as much fire spells. So Thrumming Spark Cord, very useful because it affects both of those spells. Outside of that, pretty straightforward. Get wisdom items, bump up your wisdom, get spell power items, get anything that adds to evocation DCs and transmutation DCs, and go from there. That's how I would do that. If you like what you saw, make sure you do follow the channel, and yeah. See you guys for more Druid and stuff in the future. That's all we got. How you doing?